Hello and welcome to today's webinar, Friction-Free End User Computing. This special webinar event is brought to you in partnership with our friends from Nutanix. Thank you so much for joining. My name is David Davis of Actual Tech Media, and I'm excited to be serving as the moderator. Before we get started with today's webinar, you should know that we want this event to be educational. We know that end user computing can be challenging, and we are here to help provide solutions. We'll be taking your questions live at the end of the presentation today, so get your questions in early. We also have a best question prize to help encourage your questions, and I'll be talking more about that in just a moment. But first, I want to encourage you to check out the handouts there in your audience console. It's there that you'll find links to the total economic impact of Nutanix for end user computing, a Forrester research report, as well as a solution brief for modern infrastructure for better end user experiences, and an enterprise strategy group white paper on how to solve traditional desktop delivery challenges with VDI and desktop as a service. I encourage you to check out those resources before you go, download them, and you can read them after the event. And then finally, at the end of the webinar today, I'll be announcing the winner of our Visa $300 gift card prize. If you're watching this on demand, of course, that drawing has already occurred. The prize terms and conditions can be found there in the handouts tab. And then, as I mentioned, we also have an additional prize for a Visa $50 gift card. Of course, you must ask a question to be entered into the best question prize drawing and meet the Actual Tech Media prize terms and conditions. And with that, I'm excited now to turn on our webcams so that I can introduce you to today's expert presenter. There's been a dramatic and rapid shift towards remote working over the past year and a half. EUC solutions such as virtual apps and desktops that provide secure remote access to desktop applications and data have really emerged as kind of the essential component for businesses across industries and geographies to enable their success. And so I'm really excited for our first segment here on today's event. We're going to dive into a look at just how next generation EUC solutions can really transform your business. So I'm excited now to bring on Gabby Beitler, Senior Solutions Marketing Manager at Nutanix. Gabby, it's great to have you on. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Well, thank you. It's great to be here. So, as you said, I'm with Nutanix, Senior Solutions Marketing Manager for End User Computing. I was at Sun Microsystems for a while and also at VMware with their own EUC solutions, and I've been involved in the industry for the better part of 3 decades.
Awesome. Well, it's great to be chatting with you with so much industry experience on this topic. So let's start by setting some context here for our discussion. I mean, even before COVID, there were challenges with legacy EUC solutions, and many of those challenges were really exacerbated by the pressure to adapt quickly. Gabby, I'm curious, what's your take? What are you hearing from customers in terms of their most pressing issues with EUC?
Well, we see 4 issues with legacy EUC, and this has been going on since the inception of Nutanix over a decade ago. And these are the problems that we're solving every day with customers. The first one is we see long deployment times. Everything from getting the hardware on-prem to standing it up to instantiating the users takes a long time, and that takes away from the agility of the business. We have large upfront costs for that equipment that goes unused for some time at a time. And with that solution, it's usually limited scalability. So every time customers need to scale out for more users, it becomes a challenge. At the end of the day, we found that there are a bunch of unhappy users at these customers and driving business productivity down.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, we can't have unhappy users. EUC has always been such a fantastic idea, but always difficult to really successfully, implement. Um, Gabby, do you have any examples about some customers out there?
Yeah, so there's this pharma company that always procured 30% overhead of what they needed in their EUC environment. for seasonal workloads. And COVID hit at about the same time that they made a purchase. Well, that 30% overhead got eaten up very quickly, and they needed to procure even more hardware to scale out for their business needs when everybody started working from home. What ended up happening is that this led to configuration drift and an exposure to malware. You compound that and you got poor performance. And again, those unhappy users that just aren't driving business value.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, we've seen these types of stories time and time again in the industry where companies have tried to implement EUC and it hasn't gone so well in many cases. I mean, building out a flexible EUC architecture that's secure and really makes those end users happy, and then doing it at a reasonable cost that the business can afford is a high bar. It's no small task. So, I mean, what's your approach? How should companies consider implementing EUC to make it a success?
Well, what we're seeing is looking at the future of EUC, that it's a bifurcated environment where you have the on-prem and you have the cloud. But you also have this middle piece, which is hybrid EUC. It's a mix of on-prem and cloud. And depending on where the customer journey is and the requirements and regulations, nobody is going to be exactly in the middle. Some more regulated environments are going to be more on-prem versus other more dynamic lab environments are going to be in the cloud. And what we see is an industry trend that we call the shifting center over time. And that is the future of EUC is actually hybrid today. 45% of EUC workloads are already in a hybrid mode.
And what do you think about the future? Is this going to continue increasing?
This is definitely going to continue increasing. But one of the things that people need to look out for is how do you leverage this new dynamic in a friction-free manner? And what does that mean in a friction-free manner? It means a true hybrid multi-cloud solution. It means having the security and the availability to withstand threats, and also offering an excellent experience at scale that you can deploy quickly, scale up and scale down in a cost-efficient manner.
Absolutely. I mean, I know that Nutanix has been working really closely with Citrix to develop this joint solution that goes about delivering the best possible EUC architecture, kind of the best of both worlds, if you will. So I think this is something that could help a lot of companies out there. What can you tell us about this partnership and the advantages that could be obtained by leveraging it?
Well, thank you for highlighting that. Firstly, let me say that we just announced a partnership with Citrix that solidifies our co-engineering efforts that we've been doing together for over 10 years. And that co-engineering is brought together with go-to-market. The co-engineering that we've been working on is everything from managing and configuring deployments to performance metrics, provisioning services, and today CVAD services in the Citrix cloud that offers one-click deployment and full integration into our combined services.
That's exciting, this partnership and taking that all the way up into the cloud. So, I mean, I know that this joint solution helps customers to rapidly deploy virtual appliances, applications, desktop environments that can run both, in the private as well as in the public cloud. What should we know here about this? How can customers leverage this?
So it's important for customers to take their EUC, their Citrix EUC broker, and move that into the Citrix cloud with CVAD services. This will free them to be able to manage the workloads, the end user computing environment, either in a private cloud or a public cloud, with the same master images, the same networking policies across the board. And by combining all those together, you get what we call the Nutanix Cloud Platform.
Very cool. I mean, I love the flexibility of this idea here. And I'm curious, how do you see this as being the foundation for successful EUC deployments, both today and in the future?
Well, we see this as a hybrid multi-cloud EUC with Nutanix clusters. We have right now a relationship with and an offering with AWS. And we recently announced in our .next conference the same availability in early access with Azure. What that gives customers is a hybrid cloud their way to be able to pick and choose where the workloads run best and on which hyperscaler to run them. It also gives them mobility without compromise, moving from cloud to cloud without having to refactor or reconfigure anything. And lastly, it gives them native integration with cloud networking. And that means that their staff doesn't have to learn the intricacies of each hyperscaler's networking stack. It's natively integrated into the Nutanix platform, and it just has to be learned once and deployed anywhere.
Yeah, I love that flexibility of being able to move, what you already know and run it in the cloud without that retraining. I think this could help a lot of companies out there. So, I mean, seeing is believing. It's now time to go into the demo. Jarian from Nutanix is going to take us through a 12-minute demo that's going to show us the rapid scalability of combining Nutanix and Citrix and walk you through the bursting of 2,000 Citrix desktops into AWS in under 2 hours with Nutanix clusters. So with that, here we go.
In this video, I want to show you how easy it is to get up and running with Nutanix clusters with Citrix virtual apps and desktops by bursting workloads into the cloud. We are first going to look at our Citrix virtual apps and desktop site in our Nutanix East Coast data center, showing you that I have an existing machine catalog, delivery groups, and a hosting connection, and that I can launch desktops in this data center. As you can see, our desktops in our Nutanix East Coast data center launches properly. Now that I am done testing, I'm going to log off the desktop and get ready to deploy clusters in AWS. First thing we're going to do is start the timer just so you can see how long it takes to get up and running with virtual apps and desktops on Nutanix clusters in AWS. Inside of our cluster portal, I'm going to give the cluster a name, choose my AWS account, choose my existing VPC that I have set up and configured with VPN, select my host type, change the cluster size to 16 nodes, select my existing SSH key, and then set up my networking for access to Prism and management services. On the next screen, I'm going to confirm my settings and click Create Cluster. After a few minutes, you'll see that the cluster has been initialized, and we should see nodes that are booting to be able to be installed. After a few more minutes, you'll see the nodes are installing, and they have their IP addresses. After about 40 minutes, the cluster is complete, and now we can go ahead and do our initial cluster configuration. I'm going to log in with my default credentials and be prompted to change my password. Once my password is successfully changed, I will have to log back in with my new password, and we will do the first-time user configuration. I'm going to enter my information and accept the Nutanix end user license agreement in terms of use. I'm going to continue on Pulse enablement screen and then go into my cluster. The first thing I'm going to do, since it's a new cluster, is give the cluster a virtual IP address. Once the virtual IP address is configured, I am going to set up the networking for the virtual machines. This networking will be based on user virtual machine networking that I have configured in my AWS VPC. I'm going to create an IP pool for the virtual machines. I am now going to configure my storage by creating a new storage container and configuring it for recommended settings for non-persistent workloads. That will be compression with 0 delay, just to have inline compression. Now I'm going to set up my data protection so I can replicate my master image from my Nutanix data center cluster into my cluster in AWS. I'm going to add the remote site of my Nutanix data center cluster and configure the virtual IP address. I am now going to do my network mapping for the clusters along with my container mapping for the clusters. Next, I will log into my Nutanix cluster in my East Coast data center and configure data protection. I will first add the AWS site as a remote site. Add the cluster virtual IP address of our Nutanix cluster in AWS. And do our mappings for network and for our storage containers. Now the remote site is added, I will create a protection domain. I will give the protection domain a name. Select my master image. Configure a consistency group. And protect the selected entity. Now we'll create a schedule for replication. And on this schedule, I'll make sure that it starts replication right away to get this image over to my cluster in AWS. Now that my replication is running, I will go ahead and configure my hosting connection to my Nutanix cluster in AWS in Citrix Studio. Now this delivery controller is on my Nutanix cluster in the Nutanix data center on the East Coast. And so all of the process for machine creation services and brokering will come from this delivery controller. I do not have a delivery controller in AWS. Only the workloads will be ran for MCS. Once my hosting connection is created, I will modify the advanced settings for power management. I'll return to Prism and wait for my image replication to be completed, and then restore that to my cluster in AWS. Once my master image is restored, I will check the settings to verify the mappings are correct. and then take a snapshot so I can create a machine creation services catalog. So in just under an hour, I have a cluster running in AWS. I have my master image replicated over to it, and I'm ready to create a machine catalog in Studio. I'm going to go through and create my machine catalog, making sure I select my hosting connection for AWS to burst my existing virtual apps and desktops into AWS from my Nutanix East Coast data center. Select all the proper settings, the master image snapshot. We're going to create 2,000 desktops and modify our resources for the virtual machines. Select the proper OU and enter the proper naming convention. Give the machine catalog a name and verify all of our settings. In about 45 minutes, I will have 2,000 machines created. And we had a couple task timeouts, so we had just under 2,000 machines created. Again, we are deploying machines into AWS from our East Coast data center across the VPN with no local delivery controller in AWS. We're going to create a delivery group to publish the resources. Give it a name and verify our settings. Now we're going to modify the power settings for the delivery group. And then verify that we have some machines registered to launch a connection to. We're going to refresh Workspace app and launch our desktop in AWS. So as you can see, in an hour and 45 minutes, we were able to deploy a cluster in AWS, replicate our master image, and create just under 2,000 desktops and launch a session across a VPN from our Nutanix East Coast data center. That shows you how quick and easy you can burst your workloads into AWS with Nutanix clusters in AWS.
All right. Well, that was really cool. Very impressive. 2,000 virtual machines, 2,000 virtual desktops in under 45 minutes. That was a cool demonstration. Gabby, you ready for some questions from the audience?
I am, David.
Excellent. All right. Well, I want to point out to everyone out there that I just brought up a poll question on the screen that says, what additional information would you like about the Nutanix Citrix EUC joint solution? So make sure that you check out that poll. We do appreciate your feedback on that. First question that I wanted to ask you, Gabby, they say here, what would be the main reason to choose Citrix Cloud over Nutanix Frame and vice versa?
That's a great question, and we need to look at it holistically. Citrix Cloud is a wide offering of the CVAD. Part of it is being CVAD services, Citrix Virtual Applications and Desktops. You can run those in Citrix's cloud and other clouds. You can also do the same with Nutanix Frame. There are technological differences between the way that Nutanix Frame handles protocols and the way that Citrix Cloud offering does application layering. At the end of the day, it's wherever the workload fits best is where you need to look at, and maybe the solution ends up being more of a hybrid where you use Citrix Cloud for the services piece, and then you use Frame for some workloads that are more dynamic.
Got it. Got it. Okay. Yeah, it's good to understand the differences there, the pros and cons. Thank you for clarifying that. Let's see. Another question here that came in. They're asking, where are you seeing the biggest challenges right now for EUC?
We're seeing the biggest challenges coming out of COVID. It's very regionalized. And workers coming back into the office or staying working from home, and it's also very dependent industry by industry and company by company. So the challenges that we're seeing are with organizations trying to navigate this very dynamic environment that we're coming out of in fits and bursts, if you will.
Yeah, absolutely. I can see that. I can see that. Yeah. Another question here. They're asking, what's the most interesting recent development in EUC for you? What's new? What's hot?
So what's really new and hot is more about the leveraging of the public cloud providers and being able to deliver that killer application, which is the virtual desktop, anywhere in the world close to where the end users reside. It used to be, prior to having that scalability of the hyperscalers, that architects would design um, the virtual desktops in terms of locality and always worry about hairpinning or latency back to a centralized data center. Now that we have the hyperscalers and it's a completely distributed model in that environment, you can really put the desktop close to the end user and deliver fantastic performance.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that idea of just putting the desktop right next to the end user, no matter where they are in the world. That's so powerful. Here's a good question from Jennifer, who's asking, what about security considerations for this? What have you all done to ensure that this stays secure?
So security is part of our DNA. One of the things that's not well known about Nutanix is one of our first customers was actually the Department of Defense in the United States federal government. And we had a requirement to meet very stringent security profiles. And instead of shying away from that as a startup, as a scrappy little startup, we said, no, let's go design it with security first. So the platform by design is secure. And then you layer on top of that the ability to secure virtual desktops at the networking layer with solutions that are built into the hypervisor. And you really have a holistic security solution around the workload that the users are working on.
Yeah, that's cool to know. I didn't know that, and it's great to hear how just um, what a huge part security is eh, of this solution. Another question, kind of around the same lines: how strategic is the EUC workload in general for Nutanix?
Well, it accounts for 25% of our revenue today. So it's extremely strategic to us, to the point that we've announced that partnership that I talked about earlier with Citrix. And we also look to expand that relationship beyond just the Citrix environment. So It's a go forward strategy and one of our 3 strategic plays in the hybrid EUC, in the hybrid cloud era.
Wow, 25%. That's important. That's very strategic for Nutanix, and I can see why you all are investing so much in EUC and with this partnership with Citrix. Another question here. What do you see as the short-term and the long-term future for EUC?
The short term future is going to be an interesting one as companies navigate the dynamics of post pandemic world and even areas that are still managing through the pandemic. The long term horizon for EUC is really about workload mobility, and the work from home movement is now proven out at a large scale test. It was prior to the pandemic something that very few companies engaged in and were forced to move into. And now we have companies that are saying working remotely is going to be the only option.
Yeah, I can see that. I can see that. EUC is going to be a huge part of the future. It's here to stay, and it's just only growing over time. So I want to encourage everyone out there still to respond to the poll question. If you haven't yet, we do want to get your feedback on that before we wrap up the webinar today. Gabby, I do want to ask you, if folks want to get started with this solution, what sort of resources do you recommend or ways to see this in action?
So to see it in action, there are a couple of ways. We showed you the demo that is available to be viewed. We also have components of it available in our test drive environment, where you can spin up a cluster and actually get hands-on experience in a real-world environment, managing the environment. You can also engage with any of the Nutanix representatives out in the field, and they will be happy to set up a boot camp with you where we come and bring you a Citrix environment to go and test and really explore the inside and outs in that solution.
Yeah, it sounds like there's a lot of different options. I love the idea of a boot camp, talking to the Nutanix representative in your area. I want to point out there on the poll question, there's an option to get a personal demo or try this for yourself. We encourage you to check those boxes, select more than one there if you'd like to see this for yourself and get a personal demo. We would love to help facilitate that. It looks like we have covered pretty much all the questions that have come in. Gabby, I want to thank you so much for your excellent presentation. I enjoyed chatting with you about this new Citrix and Nutanix joint solution. Very exciting announcements on the event today. And I loved hearing and seeing, step by step how to spin up 2,000 virtual desktops in under 45 minutes in the demo. That was really cool. So, Gabby, thank you so much for being on the webinar today.
Thank you, David.
And of course, thank you to everyone out there in the audience. We do appreciate your feedback on the poll there, and we appreciate you joining the webinar today. I'll leave the poll up for everyone to answer who hasn't done that yet while I announce the winner of our Visa $300 gift card door prize. It looks like this is going out to Pat Lays from Wisconsin. Congratulations, Pat Lays from Wisconsin. And we'll be reaching out to our best question prize winner as well via email after the event. Thank you, of course, to everyone who attended the event, and thank you to those who responded there in the poll. We do want to hear from you, and I hope that you will check out the handouts there in the handouts tab as well before you go. You can just click to download those. That's the modern infrastructure for better end user experiences, the total economic impact of Nutanix for end user computing, and enabling IT and workforce productivity with Nutanix and Citrix. Those are all PDF resources. You can click to download and view them after the webinar today. All right. For more information on this, of course, also visit Nutanix.com. Thank you again for joining, and have a great day. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.